Another episode of Money Talks. Today, we're bringing you another episode as part of our Do Better Together series and our initiative to amplify more diverse voices and open doors through our platform and programs, and by also collaborating with our fintech ecosystem to empower real change and erode systemic bias. I'm Kisha Allison, head of content for Money 2020 USA, and today we have two lovely guests that I'm super excited to be talking with. Before we jump into that, I just want to address, some of the news that many of you may have heard this week that we're not moving forward with our Money 2020 Europe and Vegas shows this year. So as much as we would have loved to have had this happen in the industry, we wanted to make sure we were able to do it as in a safe way. So, providing an alternative way to unite the money ecosystem this year was the best way for us to move forward, and we're super excited about that. So don't be sad. The good news is you can continue to get your razor sharp insights throughout the year through episodes of the Money Pot, like what our podcast, as well as Money Talks, and Rise Up and our Do Better campaign. So for the original Vegas dates that we had in store for you, we will showcase the very best of those programs, and it'll be available for free for the entire industry. And we're looking forward to 2021. It's our 10th anniversary, and we'll be working to create some amazing things for you. So enough about that. I just wanted to make sure I addressed the update. Happy to dig in and introduce our two guests. Tanya Van Court, founder and CEO of Goalsetter, and Harry Alford III, co-founder of Humble Ventures. Welcome. I want to give you both an opportunity to say hi. I know we have two guests today, and it's a little different. So, Tanya, I'll let you say hi first and just give a little intro to our audience.
Hi, Kisha. Thank you so much for having us here today. I'm excited to be here. Goalsetter is a savings, financial literacy, and smart spending app for the entire family. And so we're super excited to talk to all of your Money 2020 audience and tell them about the amazing things that we're doing in the market and share this conversation with you and with Harry. So thank you for having us.
Perfect. And we're so happy to have you. And hi, Harry. Welcome.
Hi, good morning. Thank you so much for having us today. Very appreciative of the opportunity to share some of my perspectives from my experiences, what we're seeing in the space in Humble Ventures. Myself, I'm a four-time founder. I've exited a sports e-commerce website. I've worked at early stage VC. I've managed an incubator. And today, for the past 5 years, I've been working at Humble Ventures. Humble Ventures is a venture development firm that drives innovation forward in collaboration and partnership with investors, startups, and established enterprises. We have a focus on diverse entrepreneurs and those building solutions for diverse audiences. So happy to contribute today. Thank you for having me.
Perfect. And I'm happy to have you guys and to really jump into the conversation. So, the title of this episode is Does Innovation Have a Color? And we're going to be chatting about funding and access for minority founders in fintech. So I think who better to have on the show than both of you? Tanya, as a woman of color, founder in fintech, and then also as a, Harry, I think the group that you work with in venture and really catering to underrepresented, founders and that community, really the insights you have to bring into this conversation are going to be great. So I want to maybe start with you, Harry, first, and talking about Humble Ventures a little bit. You gave us an introduction into kind of what it is that you guys do and the markets that you serve. I'm really curious if you can talk to us a little bit more about innovation as a service and how you leverage that with diverse entrepreneurs that you focus on.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So as you mentioned, we sit at the intersection of startups, investors, and established enterprises, and we plug in as innovation as a service. And we do three things really at Humble. So consulting based on lean startup and design thinking methodology, programming to solve specific and innovation related problems, and emerging growth deal flow. We source and invest in qualified startups through our programming. And where we plug in as an innovation as a service to the enterprise side, it really is we plug in We align internal and external expectations. We identify a problem worth solving. We provide a solution alignment, and based on piloting and executing using a existing technology to determine the best business impact. And one thing that we really try to do is we try to lead with innovation, but show that innovation is inextricably linked to inclusion by tapping new audiences, new diverse and underserved communities. Is a really good untapped opportunity for the enterprise, but also for investors too, because these provide not only new perspectives or worldviews, but the diverse and overlooked communities are some of the highest consumers of technology today. But also at the same time, Black and brown entrepreneurs are is the fastest growing segment of entrepreneurs today too. So if you want to innovate, if you want to be produce financial returns, then you should be looking at these diverse founders, but also diverse audiences.
And I mean, that tees up Tanya perfectly, right? So as a diverse founder, I'd love to kind of, get your perspective as we're jumping into the conversation. And one thing in particular, as we're talking about innovation and access, I want to lean in a little bit into the market that you serve, Tanya, and more specifically, a kind of Saving Our Lives campaign that you launched just a couple months ago in June. And I think that really ties into some of the points around inclusion, serving, underrepresented communities and having more founders from underrepresented communities in our ecosystem. So I'm going to pause a little bit and give you a little bit of time to chat to us and talk to us about saving our lives.
Sure.
Saving ourselves. Sorry. I messed up on that hashtag saving ourselves.
Hashtag saving ourselves. That's right. And look, I mean, it's okay, Kisha, because saving ourselves is saving our lives. What we launched is a campaign on Juneteenth of this year to get 1 million Black kids saving with culturally relevant financial literacy. And the reason we launched this campaign is because as we were leading up to Juneteenth, I quite frankly had a heavy heart. Juneteenth was the day that the slaves in Galveston, Texas were told that they were free. And this was 2.5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation was signed. And these slaves walked off of plantations with virtually nothing. So while they were told that they were free, you can imagine a mother who couldn't feed her kids and who was walking to uncertain territory, not feeling very free. And so, saving ourselves is a nod to that day in 1865. But more importantly, Kisha, it's a nod to 2020, where there are so many parents who don't feel very free today as they look at their own kids. Because, by 2053, African Americans are projected to have a negative net worth. By 2073, Latinos are expected to have a negative net worth. And so while we have a country that is the most prosperous country in the world, we have huge swaths of our country that are heading towards financial decimation. And so at Goalsetter, we believe that every kid in America should understand financial literacy and financial language. Every kid in America should have a savings account, because kids who have savings accounts are not only 6 times more likely to go to college, they're 4 times more likely to own stocks by the time they're young adults. So if we can get a savings account into the hands of every kid in America, in every corner of America, from Brooklyn to Berkeley, then we can truly change the future of this country. We can change 2053, not just for Black families and for Latino families, but for every family in America. Because what happens with one segment of our society, as we've seen in the last 4 months, undoubtedly impacts all of our society. So that's what we're up to, Kisha.
For sure. And, I think in going into some of the, stats into, projected wealth gaps within these communities, I think it makes it even more important to make sure that the representation in terms of the companies that are providing services and products that are really going to help in this area, specifically financial, management and all of that. There should be a lens, right, of it coming from someone who can relate to what the needs of the community is. So I'm really excited to, further the conversation and talk a little bit more about how we provide and dig into access, right? When it comes to getting more underrepresented people, not just, Black people, the Latin American community, also women. Would love to get your perspective on this, Harry, as we start talking about it, because I know as someone who deals with the underrepresented, founders and startup community, what are some of the challenges around access and funding that you see? And are there patterns that you notice over time?
Oh, absolutely. One of the reasons why I co-founded Humble Ventures was because I was noticing a lot of diverse founders, so people of color, women, veterans, people that did it that were white, male, cisgender, that went to HBS or from certain pockets in New England. I noticed that they weren't receiving the same types of opportunities and access to capital that others were. And so they weren't matching the pattern recognition of a lot of managing directors that I had worked with. And so we set out to go try to change the status quo. And we realized that by 2040, that it's going to be majority minority in this country. And so outsized returns are going to be in the favor of those who place bets on the Black founders and Black women today. And so, and also at the same point, the non-obvious ventures, right? And so a lot of these Black and brown founders aren't getting the same opportunities because they are creating solutions for communities that don't reflect the majority of the VC decision makers. And so they don't identify with the pain. They don't know that these are obvious pain points that are worth solving for. And so I think the one thing around that is because the representation in VC, it mirrors the amount of capital that actually goes to diverse founders. And so if less than 1% of funding is going to Black entrepreneurs, if you actually look at it, do the research and work, less than 1% of the decision makers in VC are actually Black people. And so it mirrors each other. And so I think one way to fix that and work on that is to change the decision makers, change the evaluators, but also change the processes in which these founders pitch, but also from the other side of the table, how they process and bring in and funnel deal flow too. I think there's a lot of systemic issues that have to be addressed in order to change this. And so for us, one thing that we do specifically is we design and facilitate accelerators for a lot of enterprises. And although the partner dictates the strategic theme, challenge, or problem that they would like to solve for, we always incorporate and bring a minority founders into the cohort. Because a lot of them are providing new, fresh perspectives and experiences, but also new opportunities to innovate for these companies. And so that's one tangible way that we like to do it.
For sure. And I think, as you talk about accelerators and kind of, the difference I'm sure that makes in entrepreneur's journey, Tanya, I want to talk a little bit about your journey and also just kind of piggybacking off of, Harry's response. I guess your take on, how accelerators kind of help, or if that's kind of been part of your journey as you're, sharing your story. If you can just weigh in on that.
Sure. Accelerators have been so much of our journey, and accelerators have been a big piece of our journey because they provide you access to two things that Black entrepreneurs typically don't have. They provide you access to capital, and they provide you access to networks. And, both of those are extraordinarily important. When you think about the wealth gap in our country today, the average African American has $5,000 in net worth today. The average white family has $110,000 in net worth today. And so now I want you to imagine for a second the friends and family round that, any accelerator will ask a new entrepreneur, hey, have you raised money from friends and family? Have you raised money from friends and family? How do we expect Black entrepreneurs who are, the products of a system of slavery, a system of systemic racism, a system of financial institutions that have redlined and given subprime loans and eaten up every bit of wealth in the Black community that are products of this entire system? How do we expect them, when their friends and family network on average has $5,000 in net worth to get $25,000 checks from people. And so, when we look at the path of Black entrepreneurs versus white entrepreneurs, we all know that being an entrepreneur of any color is difficult. And so we can talk about the journey of all entrepreneurs, and it's a hard journey. But the journey of Black entrepreneurs is an obstacle course. It is literally 20 times harder on every measurable attribute. If the average Black family has $5,000 in net worth and the average white family has $110,000 in net worth, that by definition means that it's 20 times harder for a Black person to raise a friends and family round than it is for a white person. Once a Black person gets to the point, if they do, of raising venture capital, if 1% of venture capital goes to Black people of the 100 checks that are written, that means that, the greatest analogy I can think of is for every person who's sitting in a chair right now working for a corporation. Just imagine if your boss told you that you're only going to get paid once a year. You're going to get paid once a year, and everybody at your company will get paid once a year. But in order to get paid, you have to be chosen in a lottery. And you get one lottery ticket, and everyone else at your company gets 99 lottery tickets, right? It is, by definition, 99 times harder for you to get paid, or, in the case of Black entrepreneurs, for Black entrepreneurs to raise money as for their white male counterparts. And so if we believe that this journey is hard for everyone, just imagine for a moment, based on the statistics and the data, how much harder it is for Black entrepreneurs.
Yeah. And, I wanted to, the stats are just, they're breathtaking, right? And as part of, the conversations that we want to have around Do Better, I want to make sure as we're having this, we're talking about next steps and actions and what we want to do. But what I also want to make sure is that our audience is able to weigh in on the conversation. And sorry, I didn't say it a bit earlier, but you can go to slido.com, put in Money 2020 as the code, submit your questions to Harry and Tanya. I can pull them through, as we're chatting right now. And we can also use the live function in LinkedIn. Drop us a question, just say hi. We love engagement. But as we're using that, we're going to have a poll coming up. But I wanted to just, tee up some questions from the audience, but then throw it back to Harry. Within your deal flow, are there stories maybe that you wanted to share? I know that you have some companies that are within our fintech ecosystem, but are there any kind of, journeys and kind of stories relatable to kind of what, Tanya has shared, to put it in perspective for us, right? Because it's all good to talk about these numbers, but when, we talk about the actual people and the companies, it gets a little real.
Oh yeah, so real, right? And I think all of us on this call can identify with those obstacles and struggles. But that, life gets in the way, and almost always at the most unexpected times. Look at 2020. We had no idea what was going to be happening this year, and yet at least with the 8 minutes and 46 seconds in Minneapolis, the murder of George Floyd, that surfaced a pain and a reality that a lot of us had understood and felt for a long time. But it brought I think for most of America, a reckoning, hopefully, where they could look at themselves and see, how have I intentionally or unintentionally contributed to systemic racism or to that knee that was on George Floyd's neck. But bringing it back down to a micro level in terms of the entrepreneurs that we work with, a lot of them have families and young kids, and they're all working. They all have like a side hustle, a double hustle, a triple hustle, and they all have dreams. But like my friend Tanya was saying, we have to be able to get off zero first, and we haven't been afforded the same opportunities of compounding and generating generational wealth over time, like a lot of our white counterparts, dating back to redlining, which are housing laws that restricted, blacklisted people from living in certain areas or restricted them from partaking in the pursuit of the American dream and successes. And so, and like Tanya was saying, the wealth gap has remained stagnant. Oh, it's been growing, but the median household income for Black families has remained stagnant since the 40s. And so it's just alarming. And so we don't have the networks that a lot of our white counterparts have. On average, I believe the Kauffman Foundation said it takes $30,000 to get your startup off the ground. We don't have that across the board. And so I think being able to realize the circumstances that a lot of these Black and brown founders, immigrants, and other diverse founders are dealing with has to be put in front of everyone. And we have to deal with that reality. And so one thing that we do is we've always run blended acceleration and other types of programming. So a mix of in-person and online, majority of it's online, because we don't want to uproot them from their own lives. And we also want to make sure that they're getting out of the building and generating sales and forming partnerships, acquiring customers. And so that's a big thing that we've done. And so a lot of these are mothers, and the mothers, Black community is just really reliant on mothers. And when there's a lot of studies that show when a Black mother is successful, she's actually contributing not only to their nuclear family, but the other families around them in the community. And circulating that wealth, that dollar within the Black community strengthens property taxes, strengthens health, strengthens a lot of other determinants of success. And so not uprooting them from their own lives and their families' lives is something that we definitely do not take for granted.
For sure. And I was just going to say, Tanya, please, you read my mind. I will need you to jump in there because I know you have some stuff to say.
I absolutely do. You know, I mean, you can't say Black mother without getting me excited. So I have to jump in here and just tell a little bit about my own journey. So when I started, this journey, I was told kids finance is not a thing. It's not a thing. It's not a thing. You'll never get funding. I didn't believe that. I didn't believe it wasn't a thing because I came from Nickelodeon, where I led preschool and parenting digital for 6 years. I know what parents think about. I know what kids think about. And I know that kids and parents think a lot about money. And so I knew that it was a thing in spite of what I was told. Well, I kept marching on my journey, getting a little bit of money here and a little bit of money there. By the time I raised $1 million, 83% of the dollars that I had raised had come from Black people, brown people, and women. White men would not write me a check. And so I kept going again. And when you look at most Black founders' cap tables, when you look at my cap table, it literally looks like I'm taking in a check every month, because guess what? I am. And so again, if you think about how hard it is to fundraise and how much every founder hates fundraising, imagine having to fundraise all the time while you're building and operationalizing a business too. So that's, problem number one. Problem number two, they said it wasn't a thing, and then white men came along and they funded them at extraordinary rates. Extraordinary. And so now I said, okay, well, great. I guess they've realized that it's a thing now. I'm going to raise my hand and go back out to the funding community and say, hey, you told me it wasn't a thing before, but now clearly you realize it's a thing. Now can we get funding? And what we were told then was, oh, well, now you have two well-funded competitors. So we clearly can't fund you now. And so, the problems of even when we are first in the market, we don't get funded. Other people come along and do the same things and they get funded. And then we are told that we can't compete with them. It's a problem of the systems. It's a systemic issue. So then, we move forward and we say, okay, that's okay. We're still going to figure out a way. We had a savings platform and a financial literacy platform. We knew that we needed to launch debit cards as a part of our platform. And so more than a year ago, we called a bank that was the back-end bank of, one of our white male competitors and said, hey, we noticed that you're the back-end bank for this competitor. Can you be our back-end bank too? And we were told, well, if you haven't raised $5 million yet, which we hadn't, if you haven't raised $5 million yet, we won't issue a debit card for you, and nor will any other bank in the country. So help me to understand. I can't get the funding to, develop my product, but I can't develop my product unless I have the funding. And so then we're at yet another obstacle, which we got around, because now we're about to launch a teen and tween debit card. And not only are we going to launch a teen and tween debit card, we're going to launch a teen and tween debit card that is, and this is why I got excited, Harry, when you talked about Black mothers. It's the epitome of Black motherhood. Our teen and tween debit card has financial literacy quizzes attached to it. so that when you activate your kid's card, you can activate a rule called Learn Before You Burn. With one simple toggle on Sunday morning, your kid's card will freeze automatically if they haven't taken their financial literacy quiz for the week
That's great.
yet. And the minute they take that quiz, their card will unfreeze. And so we have kids who are learning about compound interest and the rule of 72 and APY versus APR before they're out swiping a card, because we know that we need that for our kids. So no one can tell me that being a Black mother doesn't bring something different to this game, to innovation, how we think about the market, to how we serve not only Black kids, but all kids, because I've talked to rich parents and poor parents and white parents and Asian parents and Latino parents and Black parents, and all of them are excited about the innovation that we're bringing to market. But we're bringing it from a different perspective, and guess what? It's a really good perspective.
Yeah. And I think kind of teeing up into what you guys were saying about this really being a systemic issue, I want to make sure that we're spending some time, speaking to that and the what's next part of the discussion. And, what if your call to action, if you will, would be. But before then, before we jump to that, I do want to engage with the audience a bit, get them to go to slido.com, go put in your code money2020. And the question that I want to ask, and I have a feeling you guys may have a good sense of it, Harry and Tanya, but curious, as we're talking about access to funding, for diverse entrepreneurs as a woman, and more specifically in fintech, I want to see if the audience has any sense of, where we are with this. So I have a little fill in the blank question that I'll have the audience weigh in as we get to our next point. But the question is, women receive blank percent of VC fintech funding. So we have 4 options there. We have 3%, 15%, 7%, and 10%. So I'm really curious to see what the audience thinks, where we are versus where we really are. But as we jump into the next question, I'll give our audience some time to weigh in. I really do want to get to what's next. Our audience is in the industry, they're fintech. We know that it's, been predominantly white, predominantly male dominated. How do we begin to shift the culture and create more inclusion so that we're not having this conversation year after year? And then putting in there, what is the advice you would give to the VC community? Because it's a problem with the ecosystem. So we have to kind of start there where the dollars flow, right? What would your words be to them? How do we move forward from, with some action?
So in here, Kisha, and what I would say is, I come from ESPN, actually. In addition to Nickelodeon, my team was the team that launched ESPN3, the first digital video player in the cable industry. And so, we innovated at ESPN. But the interesting thing about sports in general is that sports has innovated in a way that I think VC can take a page from. In 2002, 6% of the head coaches in the NFL were Black coaches. By 2011, 27% of head coaches were Black coaches. Or I'm sorry, of coaches. I can't say head coaches, but of coaches were Black coaches. So the overall coaching number went from 6% to 27%. And that progress didn't happen by happenstance. It didn't happen because there was a moment in 2002. It happened because there was a systemic rule called the Rooney Rule that required that the NFL owners interviewed of their top 3 candidates, at least one person of color. And the Rooney Rule made a difference because there was a commitment across the NFL. There was a rule that was put in place. There was accountability for the rule. And so what I would ask of the VC community is, what's our version of the Rooney Rule? What's our version of the Giving Pledge, right? The Giving Pledge where Bill and Melinda Gates and Warren Buffett said, we're going to give away the predominant portion of our wealth to nonprofit causes. What's our version of that? And how do we see systemic change? Because we see a few of the amazing leaders in the VC industry, people like Brad Feld, people like John Callahan at True Ventures. How do we see those people who stand for justice and diversity and inclusion do something? And by the way, I don't just want to call out John and Brad. There are millions of thousands of VCs out there who can raise their hands and say, what are we going to do different in our firm? And how can I create a model for how VC can do things differently across the board? And that's what I would love to see. I would love to see that leadership. I would love to see that commitment. I would love to see those VCs walking in the shoes of the entrepreneurs who are coming into their offices every day or trying to get into their offices, and understand that those entrepreneurs are not being funded for lack of innovation or capability, or certainly not grit. Because these entrepreneurs of color are the grittiest entrepreneurs that you can find, because they are overcoming so many obstacles every day. So that's not why they're getting funded. Let's recognize why they're not getting funded and put in place something that is going to help systemically change the fabric of VC.
For sure. And, before I switch back to Harry, I want to weigh in on the poll results, Tanya. And it really, I think, puts into context everything you were saying. And let's kind of see if people see or realize kind of where we are. So, our answer for that question, by the way, is 3%. So women receive 3% of VC fintech funding, which is a number we definitely want to do better on. 40% of the audience got that right. So that's, not too bad. We had some other distributions, of the other, from the other ones at a close second. We had a shift. Sorry, still going. Now we're tied at 45%, through 3%. As people heard the answer. But that's okay. I think the point there is, I know we talk about a lot of numbers. Tanya was amazing in using an analogy to help us really see it. But I would love for, when we continue to have these conversations, that they're not conversations, they move into actions. And, that's why I posed that question to you, Tanya, and would love to get, Harry's take on it too, but just wanted to, get our audience involved so that they're able to weigh in on some things. And I do have a question before we leave. Some folks are asking for advice, to pass on to entrepreneurs. So I want to make sure that we are able to get that. Tanya, are you able to give any advice? Maybe starting from you again, sorry, because you're the entrepreneur that's kind of shared this story on Goalsetter, and would love to know what your story and advice that you would share with folks that are on this journey, maybe not as far along as you are.
It's really hard because, when you have taken the journey and seen how hard the journey is, you want to be realistic with people about, this is really tough, right? I have 2 degrees from Stanford in engineering. I have led major innovation and innovative products at companies, like I said, at ESPN, Nickelodeon, Cablevision. I've accomplished a lot of great things in my life, and still getting funding for really worthwhile business has been probably the most difficult thing I've ever done. And so, my advice is, you've got to take hard stock of, number one, whether or not you and your family have the resources to be able to go this route for some period of time, because I don't see VC changing overnight. And, I'm not going to tell everybody, hey, just jump in with both feet and, put my head in the sand, as if it's not a reality that you're going to go without a paycheck for a longer period of time than your counterparts. You are going to have, more difficulty funding your venture. And it's going to take longer to get to a place where you have a working product, where you have product market fit, where you have traction. All of those journeys are longer for Black entrepreneurs. So you've got to be personally in a position and in a space, whether you've got a partner or a spouse or a side gig or a hustle or whatever it is, to be able to weather the journey. The second thing that I would say is, get yourself into an accelerator program as quickly as you can. There is nothing like that community around you of support that can help you to navigate the treacherous waters of entrepreneurship. So those are the two things I would say. Being in an accelerator provides more access to people with capital and extends and expands your network as an African American person. I'm sorry. And the third thing that I would say is, look at crowd raising sites like Republic. I think those sites are the ones that are going to revolutionize Black participation in the entrepreneurship ecosystem, because, Black people can vote with their $100 or $1,000 and tell you if you have a product that they want brought to market, right? We can support one another, and we have to support one another in order for us to truly be able to bring products to market that are going to be impactful for our community and amazing businesses. As you said earlier, Kisha, there's sometimes, I'm sorry, I think it was Harry, the non-obvious products that are being brought to market that every Black person or every Latino person would say, what do you mean that's non-obvious? I need that every day, right? So I think we've got to support each other, and I think we've got to look for mechanisms of fundraising that enable us to support each other and bypass systems that don't want to acknowledge us, but also are going to miss out on the benefit of the great businesses that we create. And let's just be clear, VCs, right? If this keeps going on in this way for a period of time, we are an inventive and creative folk. We will find a way around it, but then, the VCs won't be able to participate, right? What would Air Jordan be without Jordan, right? Black people paired with corporations are making culture, are moving culture, are making things in America better. Let's invite us and fund us, rather than trying to keep us on the outside until it becomes clear of like, oh, wait a minute, I need that Black idea, person, community in order to make what I've got great. We can't continue to allow VCs to do that, right? There can't continue to be, oh, we're going to allow entrepreneurs and athletes to invest in our VC fund, but we're going to siphon that money off and only invest that money in white companies and make those white companies the stars because they have this Black athlete or entertainer associated with them. Yeah. That can't continue to happen. We need to have Black dollars invested in Black companies, and we need to have, the mainstream VCs understanding the value that Black companies are going to bring to their portfolios. So I'm sorry, that was a lot more than what you asked.
That's okay.
No, that was great.
It's lots of layers, and I want Harry for you to jump in. Kind of same question to wrap it up. And how do we move forward to this? From this discussion to action, what would you say, to the larger VC community, and share advice for entrepreneurs coming up?
Yeah, to the investor community, I think take a look at yourself and actually, evaluate, are you just identifying and describing racism and then trying to dismantle it? And if you're not actively trying to do it, then you are definitively racist, according to Ibram X. Kendi. You're either anti-racist or you're racist. And I would definitely take a look at that and look at how you are contributing to systemic racism. And I think that is a big thing. And I think we all need to take this into our own hands too, and be activists, really try to push and pursue power and policy change. That starts within your own firm, your own organization. Try to hire more diverse staff. Go out of your way to fund diverse founders. There isn't a pipeline issue. There's an effort issue. And and I had a call the other day with someone at a pretty large firm, and he realized that he has a diversity issue, but then he also said he didn't know how or want to solve it either, because it wasn't directly impacting him personally. And so I think that's a reality of what we have to deal with. And we have to really push people to identify, describe, and dismantle racism. From the founder's side, I always encourage founders to be customer funded instead of VC funded. And because being in pursuit of a problem we're solving, but also a sustainable business model too. Because at the end of the day, customers are those who you should be serving and listening to the most. And then as soon as you do take VC funding, your customer is now the investor. And so, and also just one last thing, I always like to wrap it up with a quote that my mom always told me and my brother when we were kids, when we didn't want to go to school. And she would say, showing up is the hardest part. And so just continue to show up and magical things will happen. And please reach out for anyone that wants to talk further. I would love to connect with you on LinkedIn. But I do have to roll to another call. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you, Tanya, for
sure.
Such amazing perspective. And you delivered a sermon today. You did it. Great job. Thank you. I learned a lot.
Ditto, Harry. Thank you.
Thank you. And this brings us to the close of our program. Thank you to Tanya. Thank you to Harry, to our guests. We look forward to seeing you at the next episode. Be sure to check out our Money Pot episodes on our podcast, as well as look at our website for more on our Do Better Together campaign to see how we can really create some change. Until next time, have a good day and a great weekend, guys. Bye.